In this last week, we have seen in Texas and in South Carolina the Constitution being taught in textbooks in ways that you don't even recognize the Constitution anymore. Being taught in ways that make the Second Amendment really only for militias. And if you're trying to stop the quartering of soldiers in your home only at peacetime. It's really amazing what's going on, and it has prompted me this week to say to you that I don't think you are losing your country. I think you've lost your country. I think we've lost at least one generation, perhaps two. And if we don't start immediately restoring the information and putting things back, we're not going to make it. Mark Levin is a talk show host who has the number one nonfiction book now for 3 straight weeks, and it is called The Liberty Amendments, Restoring the American Republic. Mark, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Nice to meet you. I asked this morning if we had ever met or even spoke to each other. I don't think we ever have.
We have never done that.
Well, I'm glad to have you on the program.
Well, I want your audience to know that you sent me a very kind letter, and you're a patriot, and you're fighting like hell, and this is very, very important.
Well, tell me about the amendments, because you have, first of all, I don't think people understand what has been taken out of our Constitution and how much we have been changed in the last 100 years. People don't even understand that the czars are not constitutional, and everything that has happened. You're calling for a constitutional convention.
Look, we live in what I call a post-constitutional period, and you're well familiar with Woodrow Wilson and the progressive movement. Well, we have to accept the fact that they won. They did win, and this utopian statism and constitutional republicanism cannot coexist, and they don't coexist. And the circle of liberty around every individual is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. You know, people think, well, I'm free to go to the movies, I can go bowling, I can get my iPhone. Well, that's not what we're talking about. You're not free to pick your toilet, you're not free to pick your light bulb, and yet you're free to pick your rulers. This doesn't make any sense. And we have this ubiquitous, all-powerful central government. The federal government that exists today is not in the Constitution. So I start with that premise, and I start with the premise that the Supreme Court is constantly rewriting the Constitution, as is the President and Congress and this massive fourth branch of government, this administrative state that's not even in the Constitution. So if you believe in the Constitution, then you have to believe it's time to reestablish it. And so the framers gave us one way to reestablish the Constitution should the federal government become oppressive, and that's George Mason's own words at the Constitutional Convention. And 2 days before the end of that convention in Philadelphia, he stood up and he said, look, what if Congress becomes oppressive? What if this new government becomes oppressive? Short of violence, what can the people do? Congress is not going to propose amendments to the states to fix itself. And so he insisted that the states have the power to get together and propose amendments to all the states, still requiring 3/4 ratification. And so we can talk about the culture, and you do and I do, and we can talk about aspects like that, but when we're talking about the Constitution, people say, I thought, Levin, you revered the Constitution. Now you want to change it. No, I want to bring it back. And the book has some of my ideas. Okay,
hang on just a second. Are you talking about because I have heard people talk about a constitutional convention before, and that is a frightening prospect.
Now, wait a minute.
You're talking about something entirely different.
First of all, the Constitution doesn't talk about a constitutional convention. Article 5 talks about a convention of the states to propose amendments. There can't be a constitutional convention. The language that the framers in Philadelphia wrote was 2 methods for amending the Constitution. One led by Congress, the other led by the states. Now, either we believe in federalism or we don't. They did. And it's the state legislatures in particular, not the governor, not the courts, the state legislatures.
So how many states would we need, and do they all have to show up, or can one state start it and say, this is what we propose we do, and then they try to sell it to other states.
That's the way it would work. I mean, they're not going to say, hey, guys, let's have a convention and amend the Constitution. No, states are going to start. What used to happen is states would have meetings. That's what they meant by convention. And they would talk, and they try and work out their differences, and they come up with agreements, and then they would send them back to the states for approval. The Constitutional Convention itself in 1787, people wrongly state, well, they were there to amend the Articles of Confederation. Well, I looked at the commissions, and that's what they were called, that were given the delegates to the Constitutional Convention, and they were not there, 10 out of the 12 states, to amend the Articles of Confederation. They were there to draft a constitution. And so people attack our Constitution as some kind of bastardized process. There wasn't a bastardized process. And as you know, Rhode Island didn't even send delegates to the convention. So what we're talking about here, the language is limiting within Article 5. What we're talking about here is a convention of the states for proposing amendments and still requiring 3/4 of the states to ratify.
What's the most, and where would you say you start?
In terms of the amendment?
That you could win, and that, are you saying that you do all of them, or are you saying we start with one and get that passed and then do another? How does this work, Mark?
The way it works is that the state legislatures would decide how many 1, 10, 3 subjects would be raised at this convention. The state legislatures pick the delegates, as many as they want. Each state gets a vote. We know this from past practice. One vote, each state, at this convention. And they can bring up multiple subjects. They can bring up one subject. The state legislatures can withdraw their delegates if their delegates are out of control. And the states, in the end, 3/4 of them have to decide if what comes out of this convention is acceptable or not.
I see. I mean, the things that you spell out in the book, I happen to agree with. Term limits on Congress, term limits Supreme Court, the supermajority can override the Supreme Court rulings, make the U.S. Senate a voice for the states again. Amen. However, you and I both know the game that we have all been duped to some level or another. The people we thought were on our side are not really on our side. The GOP is a nightmare, and perhaps a bigger nightmare than the Democrats, because their people are awake. Their people that support them are saying, no, we are electing you to do these things, and then they go in and say they're going to do them. But they, for instance, the universal health care, they voted 41 times against it, they say, but they're not going to defund it.
No, they're not. And that's why this is the recourse, because it bypasses Congress. It bypasses the GOP establishment. It bypasses the Supreme Court, the president, the bureaucracy. This is completely bottom-up. The people working with state delegates and state senators, it's state legislatures. And let me tell you this, Glenn, if this system doesn't work, we're done. That means it's over, because the top-down system, the progressives replacing the Constitution with a centralized, authoritarian, ubiquitous government, well, we can't get anywhere with that. I mean, we can argue, we can win an election here and there, we may get a respite for 4 years or 8 years.
Look, if you think Mitt Romney, I was not for Mitt Romney. He was my last choice. And I'll never go down the GOP road again. I'll just never do it again. I'm not going to listen to that argument ever, ever, ever again. And if you think that Mitt Romney would not have been going into Syria and making a similar case, I mean, he was making it during the election.
So what do we do about it?
Well, you don't go down the party roads, and you don't listen to the GOP anymore.
And I think one of the things we do is we look at the framers. Mm-hmm. And the framers said, this sort of thing's likely to happen. George Mason said it's going to happen. And he said there has to be a way out. And the way out that they provide us with, that for some reason people fear the state legislatures. Look, I know there's dark blue states out there. They're all over the place. I don't believe in static economics, and I don't believe in static politics. Things get worse enough, and they are going to get bad. Because you can see what they're fighting over. They're fighting over crumbs in Washington. This government's almost rote the way it operates now, and it just keeps moving in one direction. At some point, in some way, They have spent 100 years or more driving us over the cliff. We need to spend 20, 25 years, some period of time, trying the process that the framers gave us. Use the Constitution to save the Constitution.
Mark, one of the arguments against the convention route has always been that once you open it up to everything, and they could change things like maybe they try to make the Second Amendment about militias only and not the rights of the individual. So how do you address that concern? Do you just believe that you wouldn't get 37 states to adopt that amendment?
In advance, the states have to decide what the subject matter is and where they're going to go with it. I don't believe there's going to be 2/3 of the states that say, state legislatures that say, let's abolish the Second Amendment. But if they do, it's over. In other words, where do we go? If that's the position of the federal government and the position of a supermajority of the state governments, it's over, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, if the people want to surrender to tyranny...
So it's over either way.
If they want to surrender to tyranny, then that's tyranny they get.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of us...
you're making a very good case here, Mark. I am really at that point to where, look, if this is what you want, I'm never going to be a part of it. I won't play your game. I will go out my dying breath fighting for freedom as I understand it and fighting for the Constitution of the United States of America, and I will instill it in my children. But if that's what you want to do, just let's be open and honest about it. If that's what you want, that's what you're voting for, good. Go for it. Take it.
But the thing is, the reason the left has never gone through this approach, never, and the reason they would fight this approach is they're getting damn near everything they want top down. They're not going to want to work bottom up. And let's keep something in mind. There are tens of millions of us who still love this country, who still love the Constitution, who still revere our heritage. And we're looking for ways to deal with this. And we can keep beating our heads against the wall. Okay, select more Republicans. Well, we had 6 years of Bush in the House and the Senate, and other than Obama, it was the most profligate, out-of-control period in recent federal history. So we can do that. But
look at all the people in the House. They have the chance to stop the universal health care. They have the chance to stop it right now, and they're not doing it. And those are Republicans.
Well, I'm with you.
Completely
That's why I wrote
useless.
This book. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, look, here's the thing. People are imperfect. Our institutions are imperfect. So there's no absolute 100% foolproof system or proposal that can be made. Countries are not guaranteed perpetual existence. They're just not. And so when people say to me, what can we do? What can we do? Well, I rack my brain, and I do what I usually do. I go back and I look at our founding, and I look at our history, and even before then. And the framers, even though they set up this magnificent Constitution, they were concerned that it would be breached. If you don't have people of virtue in these positions, then you have what? You have tyranny. So... This is the approach that they left us. I just thought it was time to remind people about it, to make the case for it. I mean, I hear all the myths. I hear, the convention can be hijacked. Hijacked by whom? They're not going to get 3/4 of the states to abolish the Second Amendment. And as I said, if we do, then it's over. Then we're going to look for somewhere else, I guess. But that's not going to happen because the legislatures decide who the delegates are. They can pull them back. And you always can have 13 states stop anything. Stop anything. If we can't find 13 states to stop something, right now 13 states can't stop the Supreme Court. They can't stop Congress. They can't stop an imperial president. In other words, it's not like we have this magnificent Constitution that's being complied with. We don't. It's not being complied with. So what's the alternative? If somebody else has another plan, I would love to see it.
Mark, I have to tell you, there's I think people expect that everybody's going to come up with the answer, and I get people yelling at me all the time. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Well, because I play my role in the play. I don't have all the answers. I have no idea. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I'm not an attorney. I know my role, and my role is to try to affect the culture. That's where I am headed, and that, I think, is an important piece. But we all have to understand that we each play a different role, each of us. And, just like the founders, I mean, I'm always amazed at how Thomas Paine and George Washington got together. And if it wasn't for those two men, each of them coming with their own special talents, the American experiment would have never happened. Never happened. And yet they die hating each other. And one's an atheist and one reveres God. They couldn't be two more different men than there were there. And you look at Sam Adams and, all of them. Each of us play a role. And I have to thank you for playing your role. Really, really good case. Really good case. And maybe you're on to the answer. That somebody needs to figure out how to fix Washington. And I certainly don't know how the hell to do it, because it's a mess. Good job.
Well, thanks, Glenn. I don't know that I have the answer. I'm just trying to remind people what the framers argued for, and it's certainly worth taking a look, I think. And God bless you and your staff there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Take
Mark
care.
Levin, the Liberty Amendments, Restoring the American Public. I am so busy reading other books right now on other topics, but I don't know if that wasn't a case to read this book. I don't know what is. Pat and I have been talking about the Constitutional Convention. We've talked about it for years, and Pat said, no. I think there's something to this case, and I think Mark just made that case. It's the Liberty Amendments, Restoring the American Republic, available everywhere books are sold.